I am a blood demon. I accidentally picked up a beautiful woman's head in the forest and attached it to my own head. Thanks to this beauty, I was able to infiltrate the Marquis of Pingyuan's mansion as a concubine. Although the first wife had a noble status and gave birth to a legitimate son, it was all useless. Because the head I was carrying was the head of the Marquis by Yue Guang, he loved me to the point of infatuation. Even the crown prince hated his mother, only liking to follow me to enjoy life. Finally, the day came when the first wife's heart was cold and she was preparing for divorce. The happiest person was me. They didn't know that the wife had a special fate. She could suppress demons. Sure enough, Marquis Pingyuan Sunbin was immediately captivated upon seeing my appearance. I followed him back to the mansion, and first went to pay my respects to Marquis Pingyuan's wife, surnamed Hua. I want to take Huan as my concubine. Madame was indeed a well-bred person. When faced with such an arrogant and reckless person, she was only slightly surprised, but quickly regained her composure. She even said to me, "This concubine has wronged my younger sister." Afterwards, she ordered someone to arrange a place to stay, and ordered the servants to attend to her, and everything was taken care of properly. However, not only did Sunbin not know how to be grateful, she also coldly laughed and said, "Consider yourself sensible." Madame Hua slightly lowered her eyelids, not saying a word. Oh, it turned out that their relationship as husband and wife was not very good. This mansion was covered in a layer of deathly aura. Especially in Shuhe Courtyard, where Madame Hua resided, the deathly aura was even more prevalent. In addition to her noble fate, it seemed that there was also the aura of heroes who sacrificed their lives for the country protecting this mansion. This place might scare ordinary demons and ghosts, but for an old demon like me, it was nothing to worry about. I stayed at the Marquis of Pingyuan's mansion. They called me Concubine Huan. I was the one Sunbin favored the most. He would even pick a flower in season when he returned from court to give to me, or buy me the latest snacks. As the main wife, Hushi was also very generous. Not only did she make exceptions for me many times, she also often gave me rewards. The silk brocades, jewels, and jade that were sent to me were all better than those of the other concubines. It was as if the two of them were competing to see who would treat me better. Actually, my life was very good now. But the maid Xiao Tui kept reminding me to be careful of Hushi. She had a deep prejudice against concubine, saying that she only pretended to be kind, but in reality she was vicious. Xiao Tui said, "Giving you rewards is insulting you. What concubine means is that you are nothing more than a concubine, a lowly servant." I pointed at the room filled with jewels and brocades and said, "If this is called insulting, I hope I am insulted even more." Xiao Tui angrily scolded me for being useless. She was the maid left behind by Sunbin's late wife, Deng Guin. It is said that the late madam met him when the Marquis's residence was in trouble. Although they were of low birth, they came together without a matchmaker, and were not even recorded in the family tree, but in Sunbin's heart, she was his wife. The person who had this thought, besides Sunbin, was Xiao Tui. Xiao Tui even thought that Hushi was just a concubine, and should have been a concubine for Nguyen. She secretly caused trouble, inciting me to confront Hushi. When I heard that, I burst out laughing. The Empress's younger sister, the daughter of Yonglai Marquis, a dignified county lord, you really dare to think like that? Xiao Tui glared, "So what? When you get married, you follow your husband. She is a concubine, she is just a bastard." Me? This woman in the mortal world, after getting married, she is not reincarnated. How could she turn into a different person? How pitiful. Xiao Tui still did not give up, continuing to urge me, "Don't be afraid, just confront her. This servant and the Marquis will both stand on your side." I was silent for a moment, then sincerely asked her a question. "Let me ask you, I'm fighting with the madam, so what are you that dares to interfere?" From that day on, Xiao Tui held a grudge against me. Huoshi must have committed some kind of evil karma in her previous life. Not only did she have a worthless husband, but she also had a boy like a little devil. The little prince was 7 years old this year. His name was Sun Jing. The first time I met Sun Jing was when he led a group of people in the garden to beat up the master. Not only did he rush in to punch and kick him, but he also spat on the master. The master struggled for a while and finally got up, saying as he ran, "This is too much, this is too much. I must go find the madam and demand justice." I still wanted to watch the excitement a little longer. The main thing was that this child also carried the blood of Marquis Yonglai, and a death aura was lurking on his head. Every time he threw a punch or a kick at the master, the death aura would flicker from bright to dark. This scene was really interesting. Having lived this long, this was the first time I had seen an ancestor criticize a descendant. However, Xiao Tui was extremely scared, and quickly pulled me away. Xiao Tui pulled me back to her room. Her face was pale as she said, "Your Highness is really getting more and more outrageous." While she was speaking, the door was suddenly kicked open. Xiao Tui was startled, and when she saw who had come, she quickly knelt down. Your Highness." That's right, Sun Jing had come here. He had inherited his mother's beautiful appearance, and was an extremely handsome child, but at such a young age, there was already a ferocious look between his eyebrows. As soon as she entered the door, she fiercely kicked Tu Tui and scolded, "You lowly servant, you dare to speak ill of others behind their backs, drag her out so I can give you 10 hard smacks in the mouth." Tu Tui looked at me for help, but what did this have to do with me? Seeing that I didn't want to interfere, her face immediately turned ashen, letting them drag her out. Only then did Tun Can look at me. "Just now, you were hiding behind the pear tree and peeking?" I nodded and said, "Yes, I saw you beat the master." While I was talking, the servant outside ran in a panic to report that the madam had arrived. I sat there watching the play with pleasure, smiling and saying, "The master has gone to tell on me." Sun Jing laughed coldly, "Don't say anything later, just look at me." I felt a little strange. Causing such a big disaster, could he still escape? The truth proved that he could. Madame Hua angrily rushed through the door. Beside her was the master with a wronged expression, his nose bruised and his face purple. I stood up and saluted her, "Madam." When Madame Hua saw me, her eyes slightly evaded, then she looked towards Sun Jing beside me. "Jing. Come here." Sun Jing looked at me and said, "Mother, I'm talking to concubine Huan." Madame Hua frowned, intending to say something more. Sun Jing said again, "Mother, I felt familiar with you as soon as I met Miss Huan. I always felt that you had a gentle gaze, just like my real mother. Tell me, why is that? I have never met Miss Huan before." Huoshi's face clearly turned pale. Sun Jing revealed a smug smile. But Huoshi did not intend to let it go, directly ordering the servants, "Tie up the crown prince and bring him here." Sun Jing did not resist at all, obediently following them. It was just that before leaving, he looked at me with a meaningful gaze. It was as if he was saying, "Just wait and see how formidable I am." He is indeed formidable. Early the next morning, Sun Bin summoned me. Sun Bin and his wife and Huoshi were sitting there. He had an impatient expression, she had a tense expression. Sun Jing knelt below. I stepped forward and saluted, "Marquis, Madam." Sun Jing said with tears in his eyes, "Father, the concubine has arrived, just ask her and you will know." I thought to myself, what is he asking me about? Could it be that he beat the teacher? He needs me to help him give false testimony? But Sun Bin asked. "Yesterday, Jing came to you and told you that we met for a long time, as if you were his biological mother?" "Oh, so that's what happened." I nodded, smiled and said, "That's true, the prince even praised me for having kind eyes." Sun Jing immediately exclaimed. When mother heard that, she got angry, ordered someone to tie me up, and beat me with a ruler. Hushur's face darkened. "I beat you, could it be because of this?" Sun Jing knelt down in front of his father. "Father, I know I was wrong. But I just saw that my concubine was kind, so I blurted it out, but I didn't expect my mother to hear it." Sun Bin heard it, and his expression became even more unsightly. "How could you be so jealous?" Hushur was so angry that her chest was heaving, and she tried to stay calm. "Marquis, I'm angry because he dared to hit the teacher. This is already the third teacher who has been angered by him and left." Sun Bin coldly said, "Don't make excuses." Hushur said again, "If the Marquis doesn't believe me, you can go find the teacher." At this time, Sun Jing interrupted her. "I made my mother unhappy. I'm willing to accept the punishment. Please don't blame my mother." Hushur was surprised. "You are still young. How can you have so many schemes?" Sun Bin said impatiently, "He is only 7 years old. How can he have so many tricks? As for you, you are narrow-minded. What qualifications do you have to teach my son?" Hushur frowned. "I am Jing's mother." But Sun Bin stepped forward, pulled Sun Jing up, and pushed him into my arms. He spoke gently to his son, completely different from his cold demeanor just now. "Whoever you like, just go with that person, as long as you don't feel ashamed of yourself. You don't need to be bound by filial piety." After that, Sun Jing really came to me often. He even proudly boasted to me, "How is it? Let's see if I have her in the palm of my hand." He really did grasp his mother's weak point. Even if he caused a terrible disaster, as long as he blamed it all on his mother out of jealousy and envy, his father would scold his mother. I asked him, "How did it come to this?" He pulled the bow and said, "Who told you to always meddle in my affairs?" I laughed after hearing this. "You just want to escape your mother's control, but you want to stab her straight in the heart? The price of being a mother is really too great." Xiao Tui was still cheering him on. "The prince is still young, but his strategy is really extraordinary." Sun Jing was satisfied, saying that my maidservant was more sensible than me. I didn't say anything, and left directly. As a result, in the afternoon, I saw Sun Jing telling Xiao Tui to put a pear on her head to use as a target for archery practice. Xiao Tui was scared and cried non-stop, "Di Noang, save me." I stopped to watch for a moment and said, "You better not move, only then can the prince hit the target." Xiao Tui looked at me in disbelief. Sun Jing pulled the bow, and an arrow shot out. Xiao Tui across from him let out a miserable scream. Xiao Tui's face turned pale. Luckily, she hit. Xiao Tui collapsed on the ground. She turned her head to look at me. I clapped my hands and said, "Very good." She laughed coldly. "Consider yourself sensible." I secretly thought, what does it have to do with me? If you ask, I also find this quite interesting. I decided to stay and watch the excitement. While biting the melon seeds, I coldly looked at it and then went to get a smaller apricot to put on Tiu Tui's head. Tiu Tui was so scared that she almost fainted. Di Noang. Tunkan pulled the bow. "Do you know why I dealt with this lowly servant? Because she doesn't know what's good for her. She dared to climb into my father's bed." I understood a big thing. No wonder she asked me to fight with the madam. Tiu Tui's face turned pale. That day, Tiu Tui wasn't injured, but she was extremely frightened. As soon as Tunkan left, she said to me, "Consider that I was wrong about you. You two only have the same appearance. Your heart is not even half as good as hers." I laughed. "I'm not Mrs. Nguyen in the first place." I really wanted to ask. "It's over for Tun Ban to treat me as a substitute." She's just a maid, but she also treats me as a substitute? Or rather, she had always had the illusion that Nguyen Ti was still there, and felt that she could borrow some of Nguyen Ti's light? Xiao Tui was very angry. She spoke rudely to me, saying that sooner or later Sunbin would discover my true face, that sooner or later I would fall out of favor, and that she should not even dream of borrowing the name of her Madame Nguyen to enjoy Sunbin's favor and wealth and honor. I bit a melon seed while asking her, Madame Nguyen, you are very good, right? Xiao Tui said, of course, Madame Nguyen is the best woman in the world, you can't even compare to a single strand of her hair. I nodded, a good person, but the ending is not good. Xiao Tui was speechless at this sentence. She had originally thought that she would go to Sunbin to complain, just like she had said. But she didn't do that. Probably because she knew very well that without me, this substitute, her status in the mansion would not be any better. People are really interesting. When winter came, Huisher fell ill. At first it was just a cold, but later it got so bad that she was bedridden. At home, no one took pity on her, and she still struggled with housework every day. Who would have thought that on the day of Empress Hu's birthday, she entered the palace to celebrate her birthday, but fainted in front of everyone. The Empress did not say anything on the surface, but she had already shown her dissatisfaction with the Marquis of Pingyuan's mansion. The imperial physicians and female officials in the palace kept coming and going in the mansion. Sunbin was fine, Sun Jing was fine, they did not dare to indulge anymore. One played the role of a caring husband, the other played the role of a filial son. Sunbin instructed me, you have been working hard recently, walk less in the courtyard. Wait until this storm in the palace passes, then I will come to thank you again. I came to his house as a concubine, and I also had to have the virtue of a concubine. Therefore, I immediately gently advised him, Marquis, don't worry too much, don't be too tired yourself. He laughed coldly, what am I worried about, she is just pretending. I frowned, people who eat mixed grains, who doesn't get sick, Marquis, don't say that. Sunbin said, you are really too naive, luckily Jing is leaning towards you, otherwise you would have been schemed to death by her. I didn't know how to respond to this. At first, perhaps the father and son wanted to hide the bad things in the house. But the best imperial physician in the palace took turns coming to examine her, and they all concluded that Huisher was sick from overwork, and had to rest in bed. 1 or 2 days was fine, but after a long time, Sunbin lost all patience. If this was really Huisher's scheme, using the Empress to suppress the father and son, then it was truly very successful. He went from being a troublemaker in the house to having to live with his tail between his legs. One night, he came to me, got drunk, and said to me, you still say you're a young lady from a noble family, but your methods are so despicable. I poured him some wine. Then I laughed it off. As a result, he had not sat for long when Mama Zheng, who was next to Huisher, arrived. She knelt down in front of Sunbin and said, Marquis, the madam is in danger. Please go and take a look. Sunbin said impatiently, if she is in danger, then go find a royal physician. I don't know how to diagnose. Mama Zheng looked at me with hatred. I smiled and said awkwardly, this matter has nothing to do with me. But Zheng Mama didn't dare say anything to me, she could only beg Sunbin, Marquis, although the madam has done 1,000 wrong things, but in the end, they are husband and wife. Sunbin coldly said, husband and wife, I have served her for so many days, what more does she want? His mouth was complaining, but the Empress's people were still there, he still had to go. Today was a coincidence, it was snowing heavily. Ordinary people's bodies were already weak, if they were sick, it would be even harder to endure winter. I carried the lantern to the door, raised my head to look towards Hu's courtyard. The purple aura covering Shuhe courtyard was far worse than before, sometimes bright, sometimes dark, as if it was about to go out. Hu seemed to be in real danger. I didn't know if she could make it through tonight. You must know that Sunbin's fate was not good, it was a situation of 10 evils, a great defeat, a father, a mother, a wife, a son. There was only one good thing, that was his fate was to have a noble wife. For so when I was down and out, there was Nguyen Thi who took care of me wholeheartedly. When I recovered, there was Hoa Thi, a noble lady who humbled herself. Currently, the entire Marquis mansion relied on Hoa Thi's luck. If she couldn't bear it, then I. While I was thinking, Tun Can suddenly came, cursing loudly all the way, and could be heard from afar. I lowered my head to look at him. For a moment, I didn't have time to retract my gaze that wanted to eat people. Instead, I scared him into taking a step back. Di Noong. I came back to my senses and smiled. Why is the prince here? Isn't he with the madam? It suspected that what it saw just now was an illusion, pushed me away and walked into the door. Mind, come sit down for a bit. I thought for a bit, then followed in. I asked Sun Jing, how was the situation with Hushi over there? Sun Jing said that the imperial physician was inside, it and its father were both called over, but there was nothing to do, it could only stand outside the curtain and wait. Afterwards, Hushi woke up and told it to go back and rest first. Originally, I was allowed to go, but as soon as I reached the door, my father called me back, saying that I couldn't really sleep, because the Fongi Darren, the Queen's female officer, from the palace had arrived, and could call me at any time. Speaking of this, it became even more upset. I think she deliberately wanted to torture us. I gave it a piece of cake. Why do you think that? Madam is sick. Moreover, I also heard that its mother had suffered physical damage when she gave birth to it. It's been 7 years already. It took your mother 3 days and 3 nights to give birth to you. It was truly a life and death struggle. Over the years, she's been overworked and sick. Sun Jing sneered, interrupting me. Di Nyang, my father said you were naive, you really are too naive. I asked doubtfully, why do you say that? Sun Jing said, that year when she gave birth to me, I would definitely be able to live, but you might not. What did this mean? Sun Jing really had his own thoughts. If 2 big families were to get married and encounter this situation, they would definitely abandon their mother and child. Unfortunately, she had an older sister as the empress, and sent the female official Fongi to guard the door, letting her give birth for 3 days and 3 nights, almost causing me to die in my mother's womb. This child ate fried fruit until his mouth was full of grease, while saying shocking words. My father told me, when I marry a wife in the future, I must marry a virtuous wife. I cannot marry into this kind of overbearing family, leaving behind a woman with a damaged body that cannot bear children, occupying the position of the main wife in the mansion. If you really want to benefit from the relationship, it would be better to have a child with the bloodline of both families. I laughed and said, you think so? Sun Jing said, can this still be faked? I asked again, if it's like what you said, don't you want your mother to get well? Although she is my biological mother, for the future of the entire Sun family, she is a bit of a hindrance. But you idiot, your entire Sun family is enjoying her blessings. Even you are alive now, it's all thanks to her. I smiled. It turns out that in this world, there really is such a thing as self-inflicted suffering. Hushi is indeed a good person with good luck. The next morning, Sun Bin, after taking care of her all night, came to tell me that she had woken up. I sighed, this is also the fortune of the Marquis' residence. Sun Bin scolded, only good at causing trouble. I laughed and said, the Marquis has been tired all night, just rest assured. Sun Bin sighed, luckily, you are gentle and understanding. After saying that, he fell asleep. Not long after, someone came to the courtyard, saying that Hushi invited me over. This was really strange, Hushi had always avoided me. I went out to take a look and understood in my heart. They were all people in the palace. It must be that Sun Bin's absurdity had finally alarmed the empress. That's right, the men in Yonglai Marquis' residence had all died in battle, leaving only 2 sisters to rely on each other. It was natural for the older sister to protect the younger sister. What surprised me was that they didn't let me see Huishi, but instead a Taoist nun. At such a young age, her eyes were as bright as a torch, looking at me with a sharp gaze. I also observed her from top to bottom, my eyes revealing admiration. What a talent. Female official Huang Yi asked me, "You are concubine Hone?" I bowed slightly, yes. Female official Huang Yi quickly looked towards the Taoist nun, "Immortal Tin Hu, please look." The Taoist nun and I looked at each other for a moment, then suddenly said, "My lord, please allow me to speak with her in private." Taoist nun Tin Hu led me into a guest room. She said, "I know you have been cultivating for many years. It has not been easy. If you leave now, I can spare you a way to live." I laughed. I had already made it clear, so I didn't need to pretend anymore. What a determined child. Her hand reached out, holding a heavenly thunder talisman in her palm, with the momentum of thunder striking down. I gently blew, and the heavenly thunder talisman immediately turned into a piece of scrap paper, flying away. Taoist nun Jingxiu looked at me in surprise, and took 3 steps back in succession. You have such high moral standards. Why don't you focus on cultivating to attain enlightenment soon? Why do you still want to interfere in human affairs? I sat down, poured myself a cup of tea, took a sip, and signaled her to sit down. "Let me teach you something. If you can't see the abilities of a monster, don't try it. It's definitely not something you can provoke." She didn't sit down, looking at me with a look of horror. I smiled and shook my head. "Don't worry, Qingyun Guan has a hard time having a genius like you. I can't bear to let you die in my hands." Only then did she sit down, but her expression was still not good. I asked, "Empress Hu invited you here, only because her younger sister exorcised evil spirits. Have you found the cause yet?" Jing Su frowned. I said, "Oh, you didn't find it? You just discovered that there was a monster in the mansion, which was me, and you immediately assumed that I was the disaster?" Jing Su was a little embarrassed, but still stubbornly said, "You are a monster." I chuckled, "You are prejudiced. Humans cause disasters, much greater than monsters." She even justified, "The entire Marquis mansion can smell the blood on you. You eat people." I chuckled, "I eat people, but only eat great villains. Huishi is the orphan of heroic martyrs. Moreover, her character is upright, her fate is extremely precious. She is not on my menu at all. If I eat her, I will get diarrhea." Jing Su did not believe. "A monster is a monster, you should not be here." I said that this matter was not decided by her, nor even by me. While we were talking, Sun Bin heard the news and rushed over. Seeing us from afar, he immediately flew into a rage. "Huan." He was scared out of his wits. "Huan. Are you okay?" I shook my head. "Don't worry, Marquis." I enthusiastically introduced the 2 of them to each other. "Marquis, this is the fairy Jingxiu from Qingyun Pass outside the city, invited by the Empress." Jingxiu coldly said, "Marquis, she is a monster. If you want the peace of the family, it is best to let this poor Taoist get rid of her." Sun Bin took a deep breath. "I have troubled this fairy for wasting my time." After speaking, he pulled my hand and left. Jingxiu chased after him. "Marquis Pingyuan, don't be so stubborn." Sun Bin was not stubborn at all. If he was stubborn, I would value him even more. The righteous little Taoist couldn't dissuade him, but the female official Fengyi understood human nature very well. She told Sun Bin that if he kept me, a monster, in the house, it would ruin his future. "If you don't believe me, just try it once and you'll see." He immediately agreed. They were also lucky. That night they encountered a lunar eclipse. I am a demon who cultivates by absorbing the essence of the moon. At that time I felt very uncomfortable, lazily lying on the bed not wanting to get up. The outside world only said that I had a cold. In the middle of the night, Xiao Tui brought me a bowl of medicine to drink. I felt dizzy and nauseous, saying, "What medicine are you taking in the middle of the night? I won't take it." Xiao Tui said in a low voice, "Auntie, the Marquis personally went to ask for medicine for you, you should still take it." I refused several times but couldn't, so I had to try to support my tired body and sit up. Turning my head, Xiao Tui stood at the head of the bed like a ghost, staring at me. In her hand was a bowl of medicine, the medicine still faintly emitting a golden light. Before the ancestor of Qing Yunguan passed away, he left behind 3 divine talismans, which could destroy demons in heaven and earth. It seemed that this time Daoist Jingshu was determined. Xiao Tui brought the bowl of medicine forward. "Aunt, drink it quickly." Looking at that appearance, if I didn't drink it, I was afraid she would throw it on my head. I had no choice but to pick up the bowl of medicine and drink it all in one gulp, then my expression changed. Xiao Tui immediately became both worried and excited. "Aunt, what's wrong with you?" I held back for a long time, then said, "It's too bitter." "Xiao Tui." I told her to bring me clean water to rinse my mouth, then I lay down, frowning and saying, "I've already taken the medicine, don't bother me anymore." She quickly replied, serving me to lie down. Seeing that I had my back turned to her, she used the Bagua mirror to secretly look at me. This way of thinking was indeed correct. The heavenly dog ate the moon, the golden talisman suppressed the body. No matter how high the demon's cultivation was, it might be possible to pretend that nothing was wrong, but in the Bagua mirror that connected the yin and yang, it was uncertain whether it could maintain its human form. Unless the monster's true form is a human. In Xiao Tui's mirror, it was the face of her previous master, Nguyen Hon. Behind the door, someone breathed a sigh of relief. I escaped, but Huasher was unlucky again. As a woman, after marriage, the mother's family cannot interfere too much, or people will criticize her for not considering her as a member of her husband's family. There are many strange things in this world. Sun Bin sternly warned Huasher, telling her to stop causing trouble. Everyone in the palace secretly laughed at her. The news reached the empress, saying that Huasher, in order to compete for favor, had asked the empress to help frame the favored concubine as a monster. Even the empress, she could only endure and withdraw her. After a few days, my body was completely healed. Xiao Tui said that Huasher invited me over. Xiao Tui proudly said, she wants to apologize to that person. After hearing this, I let out a sigh. Honestly, I find her a bit annoying. She is completely oblivious to my thoughts and keeps nagging behind my back. This time, I must teach her a lesson. Madame Huo was sick to the point of death. A few days ago, she could be said to have been on the verge of death, and she had just recovered a little. I went over, and she clearly didn't want to see me, but she forced herself to see me. She politely invited me to sit down and said, "I've made things difficult for you." Look at her pitiful appearance. Even I felt a little sorry for her. I said, "Can I have a private talk with Madame for a moment?" Zhang Mama and the others originally did not agree, but Madame Huo told them to leave. She had a calm expression, as if no matter how I wanted to humiliate her next, she would willingly endure it. I lowered my head and smiled. "Madam, since I entered the Marquis's mansion, have you ever mistreated me in any way?" "No, absolutely not. She has always treated me very politely. From beginning to end, we have never had any grudges. She always does things fairly and openly. I even feel that she is too kind. But even so, she always has a feeling that she is a sinner. I sincerely ask, why does Madame always blame herself?" Huasher said, "Because my body is not well, I implicated you in such a crime, aren't you angry?" I said, "Why should I be angry?" Huasher was speechless. I laughed and said, "Madam, I like you, you are very good." Moreover, in front of her, I turned my head down. "Sure," I calmly said, "you guys are not wrong. I was originally in love." Because there was no false accusation, I naturally did not feel wronged at all. I quickly put my head back on. The main thing was that Husher was still sick. It was not good to be scared. "Don't be afraid, I will not harm you. I told you, I like you." Perhaps there was no consolation. Her eyes drifted towards the tightly closed main door. Perhaps she wanted to ask for help, but more likely she was thinking about the lives of the loyal servants outside the door. I said, "This is Nguyen Hon's head." One sentence made her face even paler. She, no wonder, he is so biased towards you." I moved my neck, saying, "You overestimate him." Husher did not understand. Things had come to this point and I was gradually losing my patience. "You need to help me do something. This matter had to start from the time I picked up this head on the mountain. That day, I was sleeping soundly in the grave. Suddenly, a corpse was thrown on my grave. The blood that dripped down was absorbed by me, also waking me up. I crawled out of the grave, saw that the female corpse had a beautiful appearance, so I took her head and used it. Even though I was a demon, I had my own rules. This female had her throat cut and died. Her head and neck were only left with a bit of flesh. The blood that flowed down to the ground stained my coffin red. Such a tragic death, surely there must be many grievances. I have taken her head, I must avenge her. In this woman's memory, she was the first wife who was rejected by Marquis bin Veen, living quietly in a small courtyard on the outskirts. In the past, she and Tun Ban could share the hardships, but could not enjoy the glory and wealth together. Nguyen Hon could only blame herself. Blame her low status for not being able to bring benefits to Tun Ban when they became in-laws. Blame herself for being orphaned, not having a proper wedding, causing him to be ridiculed by the world for tying the knot on his own. That day, she was upset, so she went out for a walk to relieve her boredom. Those two brutes came out of nowhere, chased her into the forest, then committed a depraved act and slit her throat until she died. I chased after those two brutal brutes and ate them. It's just that those two were just ordinary country bumpkins, yet their house was filled with gold, silver, and jewels, clearly having just been given a large sum of money. Husher was extremely surprised. She didn't even bother to be afraid of me anymore. "You mean Madame Nguyen was bribed to be murdered?" But I heard that Madame didn't want to implicate the Marquis, so she went into the forest alone, then slipped and fell into the abyss. Not even her remains were left. I looked at her, smiling faintly. Her face was pale. Although she didn't say it clearly, Nguyen Hon's death was obviously a concern in her heart. In an instant, her expression kept changing. Finally, she regained her composure. "Don't worry, miss, I will definitely investigate this matter thoroughly." I knew she would investigate, but I didn't expect it to be so fast. That very night, Husher called Sun Bin over. Sun Bin successfully taught his wife this time, so he rarely gave Husher a good look. "As long as you behave yourself from now on, I will not bother with the past anymore." Husher lowered her head. "Does the Marquis still remember Madame Nguyen?" Sun Bin coldly said, "Why mention her? Are you worthy to mention her?" Husher smiled slightly. "I just don't understand. You already have a legitimate wife. Why did you agree to marry my family back then?" Regarding this, Sun Bin already had a reason. He frowned. "Back then, when you begged His Majesty to grant the marriage, did you ask me? His Majesty has given you golden words, how could I refuse? It's just pitiful for her. She voluntarily lowered herself to be a concubine, yet she still had to die unjustly." That's right, she heard that Nguyen T died unclearly. Because of that, Hope T has been feeling guilty for 8 years. Hope T raised her head. I have found her body. Sunbin suddenly raised her head. Hoak T stared at him. Is the Marquis happy? Sunbin came back to his senses and shouted softly, she has long since turned into white bones, she. Hoak T said, how did you know that I just found her body? If I said that all these years, I have always burned incense for Madame, would the Marquis feel somewhat comforted? Sunbin. Sitting behind the screen, I smiled slightly. The situation was like this. Hoak T had definitely investigated, but there wasn't much evidence. Anyway, I couldn't give her the body, and it had been 8 years since the incident. So she decided to trick him. It was very convenient. With just a few short sentences, she made Tunban think that she had found Nguyen Hon's body a long time ago, but had just been holding back and not saying anything. Not only that, she also continuously provoked Sunbin. Do you know, every day I see you pretending to be a fool in front of me, pretending to be sorry and deeply affectionate towards her, I only feel amused in my heart. You say she is your maid, you lower yourself to marry her as your wife. But I have known for a long time, she is a good and decent girl, who took care of you when you were wandering the streets. If it weren't for her, you would have long been like a starving dog on the side of the road. Marquis Pingyuan, what an affectionate Marquis Pingyuan. If people knew your true face. Sunbin broke out in a cold sweat, slammed the table and shouted, enough. Huisher coughed twice, staring at him and laughing. Sunbin was both shocked and frightened. You are an evil woman. If you knew from the beginning, why have you been pretending all these years? Huisher laughed loudly. Marquis should ask yourself. I have been husband and wife with you, and have respected you for so many years. Who gave you this habit of demanding more than you can chew? In an instant, Sunbin's face under the candlelight became clear and dim. He did not dare to scold Huisher anymore, only continuously calculating how much chance he had of winning. Huisher stared at him for a long time, then suddenly asked, Marquis, have you ever loved her? Sunbin turned his face away. Why are you saying this? Have you ever loved her? Sunbin glanced at her. Have you ever loved her? So what? Now she is my wife, we are a match made in heaven. Sunbin tried his best to comfort Huisher. He said, actually, I fell in love with you at first sight, it's just that I felt I wasn't worthy of you, afraid that you wouldn't pay attention to me, so I made up an old story like that to make you jealous. He even said, I killed her, doesn't that prove my feelings for you? Huisher looked at him coldly, prove how? Sunbin, what? Huisher said, prove that you killed her. Sunbin was still hiding it, not saying everything. He confessed, actually, I didn't intend to kill her, I just wanted to have someone tie her up and marry her off to another family. He said he thought that Nguyen Hon had become someone else's wife, so she would naturally lose hope in him. Who would have thought that she would be so arrogant and would rather die than submit, so I had someone kill her. Nguyen Hon asked, who did it? 2 farmers from Vong Kok Lin. Hua Ti fell silent for a long time. Sunbin took the initiative to say, Madam, those 2 farmers were bitten to death by wild animals, now even if they wanted to testify, they wouldn't be able to. Hua Ti raised her head in a daze, looking towards the screen, is that so? Sunbin held her hand and said, of course it's true. Madam, it's good to say it clearly. We are husband and wife, so we should be honest with each other. Hua Ti looked at him, smiling faintly. Sunbin muttered, we have been husband and wife for many years, even if you don't think about the Marquis' mansion, you should think about Jing. After all, you won't have any more children. Hua sure. Sunbin said that he would change in the future. He would definitely live well with Hua sure. Sunbin stayed until midnight before leaving. I stepped out from behind the screen and said, Miss won't believe his evil words, right? Huisher was still in a daze, and when she heard me, she suddenly raised her head and looked at me. Can I ask you a question? I nodded. Go ahead. Huisher asked me if Nguyen Hon had ever resented Sun Bin and her. I frowned, not at first. Nguyen Hon always blamed herself, thinking that everything was her fault. She couldn't possibly resent Huisher, because Sun Bin had once said, she comes from a noble family, you shouldn't compete with her. Hearing this, Huisher started laughing, but after laughing, the corners of her eyes turned red. Miss, do you know what Sun Bin told me? He told Huisher, don't fight with a dead man. Indeed, Sun Bin was very knowledgeable about how to treat his wife. In the past, Madame Nguyen devoted herself to him, but he used the excuse of her low birth to make her feel inferior. Then he turned around and married me. Although I came from a noble birth, he used the excuse that I had never shared the same fate as him to oppress me. Nguyen Hon tormented herself, but didn't she torment herself? When the man said, don't compete with her, he was actually saying that she couldn't compete. The first wife tied the knot, shared the same fate as him, gentle and righteous, but had an unfortunate beauty. Since she couldn't compare, she could only try her best, striving to become a worthy mistress of the Marquis' manor. The result only proved that only when women fight each other, do men benefit the most. Speaking of this, Huisher wanted to scratch her head and pull her hair. How could I not know that I had been tormented by him to the point of going crazy? I would reflect on myself every day, feeling that I had no good points at all. I quickly held her hand, leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Shh! Bad karma gives birth to demons, demons give birth to 100 kinds of diseases." I didn't want the dead to not be able to rest in peace, and the living to go crazy. Huisher begged me, "Miss, can you not kill him right now? I want to do some things." I said, "Okay." Early the next morning, Huisher tried to suppress her illness and entered the palace, and never returned. By noon, news spread from the palace that Huisher wanted a divorce. At that time, the father and son were still at my place having dinner and chatting. Sun Bin had confidently left last night. He was very confident in his methods, thinking that Huisher had suffered a lot of grievances over the years, and that as long as he showed her a little care, he could make her submit. But now that the news had spread, his expression changed dramatically. Sun Jing curled his lips. "Let's just divorce, let's divorce. Why keep this eggless hen in the mansion?" I said from the side, "Young master, she is your mother after all." Sun Jing laughed and said, "That's right, I'm still here, what right does she have to divorce? Besides, the people in the Marquis William mansion are all dead, my aunt is the empress, how can she allow her to divorce and ruin the family reputation? If she's not crazy, then what is?" Sun Bin felt that it made sense after hearing this. But he was still not at ease. "I'll go to the palace to see." Sun Bin entered the palace in half a day. That damned son of his, Sun Jing, was pacing back and forth in my room, smashing things and cursing the servants. I was reading a book, extremely frustrated. So I shouted at him, "Stop making noise, your mother doesn't need you anymore." With this sound, the whole room fell silent. Sun Jing turned his head to look at me in disbelief. "What did you say?" I laughed coldly and said, "I said your mother doesn't need you anymore." Sun Jing was furious and rushed forward to hit me. I slightly used magic, but before he got close he tripped. Xiao Tui cried out in alarm, "Your Highness." She kindly wanted to help him up, but Sun Jing pushed her away again. "Get lost." After he finished speaking, he struggled to get up and pointed at me and said, "Do you want to die?" I flipped a page of the book. "Don't be in a hurry, a child without a mother will be eaten by a monster." Sun Jing immediately grabbed the arrow and wanted to shoot me dead. But outside, a voice rang out, "The Marquis has returned." Sun Bin had returned, but was carried back by someone. It was said that on the way back, the carriage broke down, causing him to fall out. The female officer Feng Yi brought dozens of guards and directly ordered them to pack up. Sun Jing rushed forward. "What are you doing? Where is my mother?" Female official Phoenix Gi coldly said, "Young prince, the emperor has issued an edict for the county princess and Marquis Pingyuan to divorce. This official came this time to check the county princess's dowry." Sun Jing couldn't believe it. She really wants a divorce. "But I'm still here." Female official Phoenix Gi said, "This is the emperor's edict." Sun Jing had already started to panic. He still wanted to argue. Sun Bin shouted a few times, but he couldn't. "Someone, hold him down." Sun Jing jumped up impatiently. "No. What right do you have to suppress me? I am the Empress Dowager's nephew." "Shut up." Sun Jing couldn't keep his mouth shut, was pulled back and jumped up and kicked the Feng Yi female official. "You dare to touch me? Even if my parents are divorced, I am still the Empress Dowager's nephew, the cousin of the current crown prince." He called himself a prodigy. Usually at home he showed his unparalleled strength, others would give in. But today he was like a chick being picked up by someone. He struggled forward with all his might, but his leg didn't even hit him. After he was dragged away, Sun Bin turned pale and said to the Feng Yi female official, "My lord, children don't understand things, please forgive me." The Feng Yi female official only snorted disdainfully. The Pingyuan Marquis' mansion was divorced. This situation was no different from having his family's assets confiscated. Sun Bin's father, in his previous life, was Marquis Pingyuan, and because of embezzlement of military provisions, he was killed, and his mansion was confiscated once. Later, he was lucky enough to save the current emperor, who was still the crown prince at that time, so he had the merit of following the dragon. Although he regained his title, his mansion was ultimately damaged. The Hua family's situation was not like his. Marquis Wuye and his wife both died in battle, leaving behind a pair of daughters, and half of the family assets were given to the Hua family as a dowry. Although these years, the Hua family had continuously used their dowry to compensate the Sun family, but according to the list, from the afternoon, people had continuously moved things until late at night. This was just moving things, and there was no time to count them. The entire road was almost filled with Hua family's dowry and busy people. It was not until the second day that it was almost dawn that it became quiet again. At this time, I felt my temples twitching. Finally, I helplessly patted my head. "If you want to go, then go." I turned my head down and let it fly. Huasher had been gone for a long time, covering the Marquis mansion. The heroic spirits that protected the Marquis mansion had also left. What I told Huasher was the truth, but there were still some things I hadn't told her. The body, I picked up 8 years ago. But Nguyen Hon died in the year of the lunar month, day of the lunar month, and hour of the lunar month, and the body fell into the place where I worshipped the moon. She had her own destiny. Her soul that did not disperse could cultivate into a little demon. When I saw her, I trembled, and clumsily supported her head that was about to fall off, and couldn't help but feel pity. A newborn demon, the cutest. I taught her how to walk without her head falling off, taught her how to worship the moon and cultivate, taught her how to go from ignorance to the beginning of her intelligence. But the progress was very slow. I thought about it. Since I had raised her, I couldn't just abandon her because she was stupid. If that was the case, then I would take her down the mountain, go see a few people when she was alive, and talk about the past. See if I can stimulate her a little. Of course, carrying the whole child is too tiring, so I only brought the head. At this time, Sun Bin was still in the room and had just fallen asleep. Nguyen Hon's head flew in. The foolish little demon who couldn't even speak clearly before, after the stimulation of opening her orifices, she really became a lot more agile. Her head was flying back and forth in Sun Bin's room. Sun Lang. Sun Bin was so scared that he almost fainted. "You, what are you?" She said, I am Huan. Sun Lang, don't you recognize me? Sun Lang, I am devoted to you. How could you have the heart to harm me? Her head was flying back and forth in Sun Bin's room. Sun Bin was so scared that he cried miserably. It's just that I was right at the door, his voice couldn't be heard outside. It's Hua Shi. Hua Shi Jun, that slut who harmed you. Can't you see? All these years I've been indifferent to her, in my heart there's only you. Nguyen Hon's voice sounded like a ghost crying. It's not enough that you harmed me, how many more people do you want to harm? You're a disaster, I can't let you stay in the human world. Miserable screams kept coming from the room. To be honest, her head couldn't be aimed very well. She kept rumbling and stabbing randomly in the room. Moreover, she didn't have any attack power, she could only use her head to chase people and bite. Fortunately, Sun Bin's leg was broken, so she bit him to relieve her anger. Although Sun Bin didn't have any injuries, he was so scared that he foamed at the mouth and fainted for a while. But he wasn't scared crazy. He didn't care about the fact that he was about to get divorced. The first thing he did was to send someone to Qingyun Temple to invite dozens of Taoists to capture the demon. Unfortunately, he couldn't invite Jing Su. A bunch of motley people rushed into my yard, setting up a formation and wanting to start a ritual. Sun Jing squeezed through the crowd, and first shouted loudly, "Beat this demon to death." In the room, the little head in my arms trembled. I said, "What are you shaking for? These little chickens have already scared you." Think about that year, the 9 best Taoists of Qingyun Temple came to attack me, but I cut down 8 of them. Qingyun Temple had truly gone downhill, now they only raised a bunch of idiots. The ancestor really couldn't even hold down the coffin lid even if he came back to life. The little head was puzzled, "There's another one?" I was about to speak when I suddenly heard some interesting movement. Sun Bin, leaving his son alone in the mansion, ran away. It seemed like he didn't know that I could bite his only son to death with one bite. The demon-catching situation in the mansion was so big. Sun Bin ordered someone to carry him away. It seemed like he wanted to find some old acquaintances who could enter the palace to ask for help. As he hurried on his way, he said to the Marquis's housekeeper, "As long as we clearly say that there's a demon in our mansion, that I'm bewitched by a demon, I can definitely make the emperor forgive me." The housekeeper asked, "Then can the madam come back?" Sun Bin said irritably, "What else do I need you for? A hen that can't lay eggs, and is also an orphan." The housekeeper said that Su Shi is the empress's younger sister after all. Sun Bin sneered, "What do you know?" While speaking, the carriage suddenly stopped by the side of the road. Sun Bin had just broken his leg, and was so scared that his soul flew away. He screamed for a long time before stopping. Only then did he notice that there was a fortune-telling stall by the side of the road. I transformed into him. At this moment, I laughed and said, "It seems that you are the person who has fate with me today." Sun Bin glanced at me impatiently, ordered the carriage to be repaired quickly, and then quickly left. I said, "This guest, is there something troubling you at home?" "I am a fortune teller, I am afraid it is related to your wife." Sun Bin and the housekeeper looked at each other, and suddenly felt that a little fortune-telling would be good. So I focused on calculating for him with my fingers. "According to this little monk, there was once a noble lady in your mansion, the daughter of a hero, protected by the ancestors. Logically speaking, evil spirits should not be able to invade." Sun Bin's face gradually became serious. He muttered, "No wonder, as soon as Hua Shi left, something happened." After speaking, he ordered someone to help him to me, and handed me a birth chart. I lowered my head to look. This, good, extremely good. It is a top-grade fate. If it is a man, he can be a marquis and a general. If it is a woman, she will also be extremely prosperous to her husband, if not a favored noble concubine, then she will be the mistress of a prosperous family. Sun Bin's expression instantly became very complicated. He quickly handed me another birth chart. Please look at this one too. I looked at it and said, this one is much worse. There is only one point, that is, the luck of the wife is extremely good, can be helped by the wife. After I finished speaking, I raised my head, guessed, this is not for you and your wife, right? They are not a good match at all. The butler scolded, what nonsense are you talking about? I laughed and said, I am not talking nonsense. Fate in this world cannot be forced, such a precious fate, no matter how many years you take advantage of it, you cannot keep it, sooner or later you will have to divorce. Sun Bin took a deep breath, and finally handed me a horoscope. This, take a look. I lowered my head to look, then took a deep breath. The moon is in the destiny, in a strong and prosperous position. This person is the true lord of the Hao Yue. When he was young, his luck might be a little bad, mainly because of his fate with his relatives. But the greatest calamity has passed. Sun Bin hurriedly asked, it has passed? I glared, can this still be faked? Next, she has 40 years of great luck, I'm afraid she will rule the world. Sun Bin couldn't believe it, but, she is a woman. I laughed, I've packed up, if you don't believe me then get lost. After saying that, I picked up the fortune-telling flag, turned around and left. This was the premonition that the palace official Feng Yi had given me. Sun Bin, to put it bluntly, was someone who was greedy for power. It was not that he didn't see the conflict between the emperor and the empress, it was just that he had always felt that the emperor would win. Now that someone had told him, the winner would be the empress in the end. He would believe it, because this possibility was indeed very high. After the fortune teller left, the housekeeper was still advising him. Marquis, he's just a crazy Taoist priest. He scolded, what do you know? The empress now has a crown prince, and has already begun to collude with the ministers. He thought about it, and suddenly came to his senses. Good for you, was she June, it turns out you were already prepared to abandon me. I despise you, don't even think about it. Sun Bin changed his mind. He resolutely stayed in the villa outside, then wrote letters to Huisher every day, begging for her forgiveness. What he said was, 40 years of great fortune, the country is prosperous, what can be achieved by just relying on 2 women? When that time comes, won't you still have to rely on me, the empress's brother-in-law? There must be monsters in unusual events. There really are. Receiving a pile of letters, Huisher couldn't hold back anymore, and came to me, this monster. Why haven't you taken action yet? I said, no rush. Huisher said, when do you want to take his life, tell me. Me. Huisher said she was sending people to collect more evidence, and would definitely be able to sue for the case of Nguyen Ti's unjust death. If he dies immediately, I won't bother going to the government office to sue, I'll just directly spread the news. If he can live a little longer, I'll directly sue the higher-ups, and I'll definitely have to judge this beast under the witness of heaven and earth. Me. Huisher, I'm afraid that we'll miss both of our chances and he'll die halfway. I gently touched her little head. She was very agitated at the moment, I was really afraid that she would suddenly fly away from me and kiss Huisher. 80% of the time, she wanted to scare the Hua family. I just asked softly, do you want to interrogate him for Nguyen Hôn? Huisher was silent for a while, then suddenly raised her head to look at me, her eyes unusually determined. She said, I know you're very old. Whether it's Nguyen Hôn or me, perhaps you think we're fools. I seem to be thinking, it's not just you guys, but most people in this world, I think are fools. Huisher said, we are indeed fools, but we're not wrong. What's wrong with Nguyen Hôn? She's just being devoted to one person. Now that I have lost my life, it's all because of that cruel villain. It's all because of that villain. Me. Say a few less words. Huasher is still young after all. Maybe she wants to get angry at this old man? She said, no, I have to say it. Even if she's dead now, I can't let that petty person call her husband and wife taint her. Okay, I can't hold it in anymore. Dao Dao flew down, rushed over to kiss her. Huasher's eyes widened, then fell straight to the ground. I sighed, tell her to say 2 less words. In just a few short days, the entire mansion was as desolate as a haunted house. The servants fought to collect the jewels and wealth in the mansion and fled. Now more than half of them have been lost. Only Tu Tui remained, loyally following Tun Can. Tun Can was like a lunatic, chasing after those people, beating and scolding, "You insolent people, who allowed you to touch the furniture in the mansion? Quickly put it down for me." He picked up his knife, fiercely wanting to slash and kill. Before, whenever he did that, the servants would be scared and run away. But now it was different. A servant fiercely pushed him to the ground. "Get lost." Sun Jing was so angry that he rolled on the ground. Insolent. Insolent. You guys just wait for me. I remember every single one of your faces. When my mother returns, I will take your lives. What stupid words. The servants heard that, immediately turned around and tried to cover his mouth until he died. Xiao Tui shouted to stop him, "Your Highness, run, run." Then he really ran away. Xiao Tui was beaten to death and thrown into the pond. The servants searched everywhere in the mansion, wanting to find Sun Jing. Sun Jing ran to me, searching and pleading, "Aunt, Aunt, save me." The devil would even pay attention to him. The servants searched for a while, but did not dare to come near my courtyard, taking advantage of the fact that it was not yet dark before they ran away. Go quickly, there are monsters in this mansion." Hua family wanted to seek justice for Nguyen Hone, but unexpectedly directly caused discord between the emperor and empress. Mainly because Tun Ban not only wasted 8 years of Hua family's youth, but also ruined the reputation of Vin Liet Marquis' mansion. Years ago, Vin Liet Marquis and his wife and the men in the clan had just died in battle. Tun Ban immediately spread false rumors, saying that they forced him to abandon his wife and marry another woman. A dead person could not be investigated, let alone the eldest daughter of the Ho family who had just mourned a relative. The pain was so great that she had no mind to think about anything else. Only when she came to her senses did she realize how serious this matter was. The people in the capital all knew that Vin Liet Marquis' mansion had sacrificed for the country, and the whole family was loyal. But if you asked which battle the Ho family had died in, how they had fought bravely, how they had risked their lives to block the city gates to protect the people from retreating, I'm afraid that not many people would be able to say clearly. On the contrary, the story of Miss Hua stealing another man's husband was rumored to be so vivid that it became a real thing. It became an indelible stain on the entire Meritorious family. Not to mention how much humiliation Miss Hua had endured for so many years. Even the eldest Miss Hua, who was an orphan of a martyr, had been oppressed for so many years. The emperor and empress were a young couple who had gone through hardships together. But standing at the pinnacle of power, how could they bear the fact that the person lying next to their pillow was the mother of the crown prince, who had such a distinguished background? The way the emperor thought of was exactly the same as Sun Bin's, his brother-in-law's. That was to suppress her reputation, to tarnish her family, to make that noble young lady fall from the blue sky, to be stained with the dust of the world. Mrs. Hua decided to sue her former husband in court. The emperor sent someone to me. Just like how people always talk about stealing husbands and seizing love affairs more than about military matters at the border. If everyone could see the scene of the Marquis' mansion being exorcised, it would surely be enough to keep people talking about it for decades. At that time, who would care about the unjust death of a woman 8 years ago? End. If you find it interesting, please give it a like and subscribe.